Very excited now to bring in Mike Davis. Now, Mike has been, he's from the Article 3 Project. Mike has been telling us over and over that these cases against Trump are completely not legit. President Trump himself, when I was at the dinner with him in New York on Saturday night, he said the reason that people don't believe these cases is because they understand they are Democrat cases. They are not legit. Well, now it turns out, Mike, the Supreme Court will be getting a bite at the apple on the Trump cases. Mike Davis, you've been saying this since day one. You've now been vindicated. Walk us through what the latest is.
Well, there's a lot going on. So the Supreme Court is trying to decide whether they're going to take Jack Smith's January 6th case, this unprecedented indictment by Biden special counsel Jack Smith against President Trump for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Twisting arms politically is allowed by the First Amendment. If this were a crime, Democrats would be in prison for objecting to Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. We don't see Al Gore and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton in prison after they objected. Right? So what the Supreme Court is looking at deciding is what we've been saying all along, which is what President Trump did on January 6th was either protected by the First Amendment if he's acting within his personal capacity, or if he's acting with his presidential capacity, it's covered by presidential immunity. And presidential immunity means you can't charge a government official for what they're doing in their official capacity, and under Supreme Court precedent, the outer perimeter of their official capacity. And Jack Smith has charged President Trump essentially for ordering his vice president not to certify the election. Well, you can't do that in your personal capacity. A private citizen Trump can't order the vice president to do anything. He can only do that as the president of the United States. And the president has a constitutional duty to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. So the Supreme Court may hear this. Jack Smith is trying to bypass the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals because Jack Smith is trying to interfere in the 2024 election. Jack Smith desperately wants President Trump sitting in a courtroom starting March 4th, 2024 for several months, 6 or 7 months, and then have him in the D.C. courtroom with D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan and railroading him and interfering with the presidential election before the election, and then throw him in prison for the rest of his life after the election. And I hope the Supreme Court understands that they cannot go along with this blatant Democrat lawfare and election interference. The Democrats waited 30 months to bring bogus charges against President Trump. They stacked these trials in March and May and August, clearly to interfere with the election. There's no reason that these trials cannot happen after the election, other than Democrats are waiting lawfare and election interference to take out Trump through the legal process, because they know that President Trump is going to beat President Biden like a drum on November 5th, 2024.
Well, and Mike, that's the thing, right? Because if these things get pushed back, right, and people need to understand that, and I said on Charlie Kirk this morning, in the previous hour, but if people understand, it's not like a movie, right? There's most of what happens in one of these cases actually takes place before you reach the trial phase. Your pretrial motions, your discovery, your witness lists, over and over. There's so much that happens. If all of that gets shifted to the right, as we would say in the military, so it gets postponed, it sets off a chain reaction. Now your trial date isn't even going to be until after the election. Trump wins. All of this stuff could be declared moot because you can't do any of this to the President of the United States. And it also, by the way, takes away the central argument of the never-Trumpers who have been saying we need to move past Trump because of these cases. Guess what? The cases have now been moved past the election. Well, if assuming or basically reanalyzing and assessing that this Supreme Court, because it is an originalist Supreme Court, really, by the way, and thanks to your personal work, Mike Davis, of getting these originalist jurists and Trump picks up on the court.
Yeah, let's just look at this, Jack. Let's look at what the Democrats are trying to do here. Let's take Trump out of the picture and just say the President of the United States. They brought in 4 unprecedented indictments of a former president and the leading presidential candidate, and they're trying to say what President Trump did on January 6th was criminal somehow. The only way it would be criminal on January 6th is if Trump actually incited a riot on January 6th, which he did not do. There's zero evidence of that, or Jack Smith would have brought those charges, right? And so the evidence does not exist. And so what they're trying to say is that the president can face criminal prosecution for ordering his vice president to do something. Well, guess what? That sets up a very bad precedent for future presidents and former presidents. For example, President Obama ordered an extrajudicial drone strike and murdered a 16-year-old American citizen abroad. Didn't get a court order, just did it. Just ordered a drone strike and killed an American. He should have presidential immunity under longstanding understanding of the powers and responsibilities and the protections of the president. But if these Democrat prosecutors like Jack Smith and these Democrat judges like Tanya Chutkan or these Democrat judges on the D.C. Circuit or Democrat justices on the Supreme Court and a couple weak Republicans, if they don't see that there's presidential immunity here, does that mean that the Trump 47 Justice Department can charge President Obama for murdering the 16-year-old American citizen? Do these Democrats really want to go down this path where you're destroying the presidency and destroying our republic because they fear that they can't beat President Trump at the ballot box, so they just want to throw him
now, Mike,
for the rest of his life, bankrupt him, and disqualify him?
That's exactly right. Now, Mike, before the break, you were telling me that Elise Stefanik is now weighing in on a new judicial complaint. While we have a few more minutes with you, I wanted you to know if you could briefly break that down for us.
Yeah, Congressman Elise Stefanik from New York is an all-star. She's in House leadership. She is the Congresswoman who filed the judicial ethics complaint against Manhattan Judge Arthur Engoron for the bogus rulings up there, the obvious partisanship against Trump for the civil fraud case against Trump for the fraud of paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full as agreed on time with interest, right? And so now she's brought a new complaint against D.C. Judge Beryl Howell, who was the chief judge of the D.C. District Court from 2016 to 2023. Judge Beryl Howell is a Democrat operative in a robe, and she's the one who supervised the bogus Mueller probe with Weissman. She supervised Jack Smith's grand jury investigations of Trump from Mar-a-Lago on January 6th. She's railroaded January 6th defendants. She's forced them to stay in jail, pretrial detention. She is a partisan activist. She gave a highly inappropriate political speech a couple weeks ago where she essentially said that re-electing President Trump will bring fascism to America. He didn't say Trump by name, but it was very clear what she was talking about. She was up there, Biden's Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, hugging and receiving an award and having a cheerleader session, a pom-pom session, where they were praising each other and trashing Republicans, trashing Trump supporters, citing a book, an anti-Trump screed. And so Elise Stefanik, to her great credit, filed an ethics complaint with the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals because we cannot let this lawfare continue by these Democrat prosecutors and these Democrat judges and these Democrat hellholes like D.C., New York, and Atlanta. The American people, not these partisan activists, prosecutors, and judges, get to decide the next election.
That's incredible. No, so this is the fact that we actually can get some accountability for this is absolutely critical. And I do think, though, as you say, the ultimate backstop to this will be taking it to the Supreme Court, this current Supreme Court, thanks to the Trump appointees. And I need to say this again and again, they are not pro-Trump, they're pro-Constitution. And it's the first time we've actually had constitutionalists on the Supreme Court in an entire generation. And we're going to show this country what the difference is between having activist judges who legislate from the bench, who make law from the bench, and those who actually apply the original framers' intent, the text, history, and tradition. By the way, I love that test, Mike Davis. The text, history, and tradition test, that should be applied to every single piece of every single statute that crosses the desk of the Supreme Court. Mike Davis, final word, 1 minute. Where can people go to follow you? What are your coordinates?
I would just say this. Remember, Congress has speech or debate clause. They have congressional immunity. Judges have immunity. Why the hell doesn't the President of the United States have immunity? If President Trump does not have immunity, these judges are being politicians in robes, and it will come back to bite Congress. It will come back to bite future and former presidents. It will come back to bite these judges, right? And I would say go to article3project.org, article number 3project.org. You can donate there. I'm at Article 3 Project, at Article number 3 Project on Getter, Twitter, Truth. And my personal, when I'm not kicked off, is at MRDDIA, MRDDIA. And thank you so much, Jack. You've been a huge supporter of ours.
God bless, Mike, as always. They want to turn us into a third world banana republic. Well, we're going to be talking about the third world and talking about some of these banana republic type nations coming up next.